And yet again, I was laughing backstage with our panelists, so I almost missed my cue, which just means this next panel is going to be a lot of fun. So, we're ending the day talking about something really important and something that is actually a really exciting in this time of signage. So, this next panel is called Designing QSR Signage That Works. And quick service restaurant signage means a lot of things. It's signage in the store, it's what a lot of them are being used to even order and check out. It's digital menu boards and drive throughs, it's everything. And I'm so excited to bring on this next panel to talk about it. So, let's bring them on. We have Robert Heiss, Brian Mazzaros, and last but not least, Sean Hobday. Welcome, guys.
Welcome. Hey, Steph.
Hey, Steph.
So let's start by just all of you going around, introducing yourselves, and talking a little bit about what you do. So, Robert, do you want to go first?
Sure. Robert Heisey. I'm Executive Vice President for Global Display Solutions. We're a LCD and LED e-paper display manufacturer. Our headquarters is in Italy, but we're based here out of Rockford, Illinois.
Amazing. Brian?
Sure. Brian Mazzaros, CEO of OpenEye Global. We're a digital experience design agency. We are based here in New Jersey, work primarily across the US, but we focus more on the strategy and design behind a lot of these engagements that are out there.
And Sean?
And Sean Hobday, SVP Global Sales for Zones. We're headquartered out of Seattle, Washington, but really full global coverage. And we're in the IT space, really supporting retail and QSR. And as we're seeing this emergence of, that digital signage to everything that's attached to the IT, we're really going all in. Happy to be on the panel with the folks here and looking forward to the conversation today.
Amazing. So let's dive right in. I figured I would just kind of ask these and throw them out to you guys, and whoever wants to answer them first can go ahead. So when each of you think about QSR signage today, what is the biggest shift that you have seen in the past few years of how restaurants are actually using digital displays?
Robert, I'll let you go. You have a good thought, I could tell.
Yeah, I was going to say that, initially, going back probably at least 13 years when we started doing QSR signage, it was initially out there trying to experiment and replace static. And what we're seeing today is it's kind of graduated to more of the advanced features, like using analytics and being able to use that data to shift some of the information, the content on the screen.
I gotta say, for me, it's been the improvement in, to Robert's point about the back end, the CMS and the analytics, but I also have to say the improvement in design. I feel like when digital menu boards first came out, it was like, we're just gonna throw everything on that screen and we're gonna kill it with graphics and video, and it was so confusing for the guest. And so now, I think fast forward to now, I think there's just been a better understanding of the mechanics of the design, the mechanics of how to use the CMS to schedule, to tie in everything from what's happening at the POS to analytics to serve up content that's relevant to the guest. So I think there's been this shift in better understanding analytics and how that impacts design and the visual experience for the guest.
Yeah, and it's that shift, Brian, I think, from the static board to the intelligent interface, right? And as we see more and more coming up from that ISV space to make that a little bit easier for those that are managing the content, as well as the analytic engines that come around it, you're going to be seeing a lot of the things that just go from, how do you manage your menus dynamically? How do you ensure that you've got that right localization and flexibility within what and how you want to manage that store and restaurant in that space is all, really kind of coming together really well. And how does that tie to loyalty and other factors that you're going to have to address from that client experience?
I kind of say the other thing too, I kind of noticed and is that there's been more confidence by QSRs in the technology. It's something that, for a while it was like, how do you build in redundancy? How do you address the conditions that are in the space itself, to screens going dark? And that was always a concern because there was always a significant workaround to try to make that happen. And now with screens that are 24/7 to back-end PCs to screens that are have built-in players to them, all that becomes a lot easier, I think, for QSR to want to invest into it, because they know that that part of the operation is not going to fail. And that was always a big concern for them spending the money, because if those screens go dark, customers don't know what to order. And obviously that impacts operation. And I've seen the confidence level just continue to increase amongst QSRs.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that experimentation led to where people weren't so afraid anymore. It becomes almost, hey, de facto, we're going to look at using this, and they know how to use that technology. And they know how to set up their networks, I think, a little bit more intelligently.
And that's really the key, as you start to think about that. And then the environmental concerns that you talked about, Brian, right? You think of, there's the front end of the shop, but there's also the back end, and that shift to digital displays, and how do they work operating in front of, on top of a fryer, and other environmental concerns, on top of, the unique things that we were talking about in New Jersey earlier.
Well, that's another story.
Yeah, that's a story for another time. But all of these factors, right? And Robert, we appreciate the products that you're building, right? Because there's a different screen type for a different need with the content and what you're driving, and where that's located within the environment as well.
Absolutely. So, how, in each of your opinions, how do you think technology and design and operations all have to come together to actually make a system like what you were talking about that actually works day to day?
I'll start out, because I thought that's a really interesting question, Steph. In the past, whenever we've talked with a QSR, you're either typically talking to one of three groups in the brand, either IT, marketing, or store ops. And the problem is, when only one of those really take part of that project, it really is going to have issues trying to get integrated into the rest of the brand. So I think one of the most important things to do from a brand perspective to make a rollout like that work is to really get a group of people from all of those areas together and help drive that project.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. I mean, it's always the challenge, right? It's to get the stakeholders together for these solutions to come. I mean, IT has their role, and marketing, and even store design has their role too, as far as how it's integrated, because of different ways to configure or to place menu boards into it. And even now too, you see restaurants that are playing around with form factors and positioning of it. So there's a lot of new opportunities that are being created because of that. I think the interesting part, the hardest one is getting that alignment between IT and opening up access to POS, because that has always been the disconnect for menu boards. Is you would have pricing and LTOs and everything on the board itself, but it'd be disconnected from what's actually happening at the register. And so now there seems to be more openness to integrate the two, so that POS impacts what's happening at the screen itself, so that it makes it more real time and offers up those suggestions and those opportunities. I think that there's always been like sort of this sacred, or sort of this sacred space. Like, you leave POS alone, you leave digital menu board alone. And then when they start to kind of question, it's like, well, why isn't the menu board having more impact? And then the obvious is, I'll just point fingers to the POS, because I can't tell what the POS is doing. So, it's like you want to automate the process, make it easier. So I feel like that's been an interesting battle over the past, I'd say, couple years, to see those two groups kind of come to alignment.
Yeah, and to build on that, a lot of that, we're all independent Jenga blocks of third-party solutions trying to go make something happen. And I think it was the rigidity that we saw in the traditional POS systems that didn't allow for some of the modernization that has to happen. If you think of what we're trying to do here and talking about digital display, it also affected the same piece on mobility. And with some of those new ISVs that are coming out that are going to really unlock this full capability that quite frankly has been available from a hardware and technology and network standpoint, that freeing up around the POS side is going to bring a lot of value there. And then you start to be able to then take a look at, hey, how do we design with standardization and scalability? Right, we've got our hardware uniformity, the software compatibility, and then your edge compute resilience that kind of goes along with that drives that design that you can continue to go build upon and unlock those features as they become more and more available. And back to it, you need all three parties to try to understand what they're trying to accomplish in the store. What's the store design team? What's the IT team going to require? And then restaurant operations, so that really you're building that platform that's going to work best for their client base.
One of the bigger challenges we've been seeing, in the past, all of the biggest brands had these legacy point of sale systems, but these were systems that had APIs and you could access all the information out of them. Nowadays, we're starting to see a lot of these brands using, some of the new cloud-based type point of sale systems. And that makes it a lot more difficult to get interfaced in with the CMS. So I think that's still something that we've been trying to work on. There's some workarounds, playing around with, video over IP and things like that to try to create some of that connection. And there's been some CMSs that have written into some of these newer point of sales, but I think that's a great point. I hadn't really thought about that disconnect between point of sale and the menu boards, but that's going to be important to get solved.
Yeah, and then you've got like the applications for the loyalty program sometimes also sitting far off the edge as a third-party platform as well. That's really how we're going to begin to think about, what's the future look like. Augmented reality and other aspects that could come into play. It's probably still 5+ years out, but what's that going to look like? And as you're interacting in your phone or mobile device is really the trigger that's going to make all of this stuff work together. That's probably five years from now when we're kind of talking about that technology on a forum like this. But those are all the things that we should start to see be really unlocked for us, and that's why I'm so excited about this, because it really is an exciting time for us in this space, because the back end is finally catching up to what the front end was capable of delivering for a while.
So the thing about a lot of QSRs is that most of them are franchises that are national, if not international. So when you're designing a signage network that needs to function consistently across hundreds, if not thousands of locations, what are some key considerations there?
Ooh, that's a good one.
I know.
That's a good one, especially wow. No, I think franchises, because we just had kind of gotten a couple rounds on an RFP that had a franchise model to it, and I try to think, and the other guys can probably add into too. From one part, it was hard to find standardization amongst that, because for one, those budgets are a little bit different. The stores don't also necessarily, they follow brand protocol, but they might not be equal in square footage. Their menu board design could be 3 panels, some could be 4. So it becomes a bit technical to where you're trying to deploy a system that has standardization to it, but the realization that some may have an extra panel to it. Those panels might be a little bit different in how they're configured. Or you might also have some franchises that have gone out and have operated separately. So they could have legacy equipment that's already there. And so you also have to take that into consideration, how you tie that back into the system itself. And then also, and I've seen too, like some have different menu items that they carry versus others. So you really, I think in those kind of situations, there's a lot upfront in terms of planning to put together sort of a hierarchy that allows for some consistency and control. And then obviously having the brand have their input into it too, but then they also have to have a little bit of leniency depending upon their contracts with certain owners. So it's a tough one to navigate. I can't say there's a set playbook that we have in those kind of situations. A lot of it is that discovery and planning. What do they have? What do they need? How does that align with the menu board itself?
Mm-hmm.
And then you sort of back that into what the solution is behind the scenes. Robert and Shaw, I'm sure you guys can add probably a lot more context than what I'm putting in there now.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say you were absolutely right. I was going to say that, especially in the larger deployments, the CMS, the content management system that is able to manage across that many different endpoints and maybe have that segregation, and then talk about the device management, right? So actually being able to, whether it's through the CMS or as a separate system that can see how all those devices are working, where there's issues, what needs to be upgraded, what is maybe not connecting into the network, and so forth. But ultimately, it comes down actually from Florian's keynote, where he had one area that focused solely on managed services, and this whole idea of working with companies like a Zones or a GDS or an OpenEye that may be able to kind of come in and manage that for the brand to make sure that on a global basis, the devices are running, that the content is showing where it needs to show and what it needs to show. I mean, ultimately, it's hard for brands themselves to have that kind of expertise. So I think ultimately the answer is trying to find the company, and there's a bunch out there that can do those managed services.
Yeah, and it comes down to the regional play as well, right? So not only with local flavors, it's how your network's going to run, how you're maybe in the Americas, it's corporate owned. When you get to EMEA, right, you might have 5 or 6 big franchisees that are running the entire platform for you. So how do you have that brand standard, but then have your localization to it? Because the worst thing that we see sometimes with clients is that they design in isolation in a country like the US, and those products aren't available when you get to MIA or widely distributed well in order to be able to roll out and then manage. And then you have all of those weird localization problems that both Robert and Brian were talking about. How are you gonna manage the life cycle of that product? Be sustainable as you start to bring technology back and then upgrade what's out there, and then have a really good IT asset management system that allows you to know what's there, especially in a high break fix environment and in replace environment, so that you're not losing track of what's available. And somebody's got to do the ditch digging to keep all of that together, especially in a franchisee environment, because that network your network may or may not be controlling everything that's sitting on top of their franchisee's network. So, a lot of work needs to be done, up front to ensure that you're designing correctly, that you're designing with a global mindset, that you don't have weird components that somebody bought off of someplace like Amazon that you can't find anywhere else in the world, which is a real world problem. And then ensuring that you're setting up with the right network that's going to be able to give you the visibility to what's out there.
So, how is it that you balance a centralized control with that local flexibility that a lot of QSRs might want? Like, and ensuring that every store kind of feels on brand, but still pretty responsive to their audience?
I mean, Brian is probably keyed up mainly for you.
Yeah, it's. I mean, I think there's a couple of ways to sort of dissect this. I think first you do have to kind of look a little bit at sort of that back end element too. I think the CMS plays a significant role in how that control is divided and how that is managed. How much of that is localized to the store itself? How much is that controlled from headquarters? And then also, I think there's that conversation with the brand itself, because the brand, will also dictate to how much of that control they want in general, universal across certain regions, across different countries, and how much of that do they want to allow the local operator to have that impact. We've certainly have seen some to where there's the manager special, and they give that flexibility to them with certain products, but the reality is that they want to ensure there's that brand consistency in the way things are priced, the way things are delivered when special appear, when they are removed. And, the CMS allows for that flexibility. I've not seen situations where there's been, a lot of openness to giving local franchisees the ability to control the entirety of the menu. It isn't it there, and I don't think it's in the brand's best interest to allow that to happen. And so, the great thing is obviously with a good CMS in the background, you can lock that down. And then also too is if you create a lot of those hooks, those automated hooks too, that also helps to demonstrate that ability to the franchisee or the those owners that there is still that element to where content is being localized because it's reacted to what's happening at these local systems or the reactions, what's happening there, that content changes based upon the demographics of that particular store, which is obviously a concern. They want that to be as tailored, as personalized as possible. So I think if you start to demonstrate that in your strategy, that helps to combat some of those concerns that local owners have by not having much of an impact or influence over what's being displayed in that menu board.
Yeah, I think, and I think Brian's right. You have to be very, very careful, and he'll tell you probably in more detail, more than I can, that creating content is a science, right? There's a real science behind how things are displayed. So you got to be very careful about not creating something that looks like it's a Frankenstein of a menu board.
Yeah.
But I think it's good to have some pieces that can be potentially customized. Maybe it's a donut of the day or a vision into the kitchen that may be going on within that particular location. We have Culver's restaurants here in Northern Illinois and Wisconsin, and they have the custard of the day, the flavor of the day, right? That's very particular. That's something you can put in that menu board space that will allow them to feel like, hey, I'm looking at something that's part of my location. It may be temperature. It may be maybe the sponsorship of a local sports team or something. But you got to be very careful how you're displaying the menu items you want to sell and where you put your highest margin items or where you want people's eyes to move, because that's all dictated through well-established practice at this point.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things that'll be up and coming, and Ryan would love to hear your thoughts on this as well, is inventory aware menus, right? So we're getting more tied to the POS system and the inventory management within the store of how are you moving that from being able to trigger a product that's out of stock, just not even showing it as an option. Do you see that as potential trends coming in? Obviously with
Sure.
a larger QSR, you're not necessarily running out of menu items there, but as you move down that stack to 100 to 200 location franchisee, Culver's, I don't want to go in there and run out of my favorite flavor of ice cream, have it available for me to see up there just to tease me, or worse, a piece of tape over the screen that says out of stock or something like that, which we've all experienced and seen as well.
Oh, it's both good points, and I think from our side that you kind of love the fact of retailers when QSRs open up that data source, because there's so much ability to then tailor that, and I love it from the inventory side, because you can see what's there, what's not. I love it from you can play around with that to see what's trending and be able to highlight that. and be able to push more of that particular, special, if that's what's going in that area. There's other ways to be very creative in telling the story through having data, just manipulating the way the images appear on the display itself, or just even that ability to adjust certain aspects of the menu board just in general, again based upon what is happening, or be able to swap that out, just as Robert said. If there's certain flavors that are trending over others, that small little space that's reserved for can enlarge itself, and or just change to an alternate graphic that's best represents or highlights that particular special. I mean, we all know how visuals impact purchasing behavior. And so to have data that can drive that, those are just other really fun hooks to play with that help to lead to an increase in sales on those items, which is again, it's all the psychology of sell. It's how that relates, and what better a way to sell something that is really relative because of the numbers that you have real time that are coming in from the POS.
So, Robert, I'm interested to hear, like, from your displays and hardware standpoint, what do you think is advancing most rapidly right now? And what do you think is kind of still misunderstood about display performance in the QSR environment?
Yeah, boy, great question. I love to geek out because I love technology. I think that overall, the basic pieces of technology, and our company focuses primarily on really rugged outdoor displays, right? That's kind of our bread and butter. I think what is most misunderstood from, let's say, a display perspective is that more brightness is better, especially outdoors. And you're smiling because maybe you know what I'm going to say is that it's not brightness, it's contrast, right? It's your eye's ability to see, whether it's the colors or the offset, how sharp everything is. And so we really focus on how to make the highest contrast displays in full outdoor. And I think that's important because you can reduce the brightness levels, reduce the power levels, reduce the heat, right? We've all seen displays that kind of look like they've been baking, in the sun for a while and maybe have been overdone. So you have to look at how that thermal management is happening in the displays. I think as far as what trends in technology are coming up, there's been a ton of talk. In fact, I think there was a segment earlier on direct view LED, or whether it's micro LED, right? LED replacing LCD. And I think that's interesting. I think the cost calculation isn't quite there yet, that balance. But I think eventually we will start seeing more direct view LED, especially indoors. And I think it really allows, instead of staying in these very specific, 55-inch 16:9 or 42-inch or 50-inch, whatever it is, displays set up as your menu board, now you can create one big palette and very easily start playing around more with that content. I think that driving the right content is what's key for driving the ROI in QSR, right? You want to have good display hardware, right? You can't have display hardware that's going to look bad. That's not going to show off your brand. But given that you've got the good hardware, the good equipment, the good displays, then it's got to be all about content and being able to maximize that canvas.
Absolutely. So, okay, continuing on, Sean, I wanted to ask you, as Zones is now entering the Pro AV space, as we're seeing IT and AV kind of converge. We've been seeing it for a while. So, what does an IT-led perspective bring to these projects that maybe like a traditional AV team maybe wouldn't have seen at first?
Yeah, it really starts with that application layer, and you've heard me talk a little bit about that today, because that's going to drive a complete change, as we see in the industry, because it's gonna continue to unlock the availability of a lot of function and features that I think we would have expected to be there, and really that gatekeeper is functionally, some of those POS systems are still almost like green screen in a lot of way, right? Robert's grinning a little bit there, and Brian's grinning as well. But as you start to see that change, it really starts to unlock a bunch of other things that we're going to start to see as well. So, how does that network design come into play, which is really the IT function? So as we work with store IT, ultimately, what is that bandwidth requirement going to be and going to change as we take a look at it? How is that redundancy look, and how much is that going to have to play in as we take a look at 5 or 6G potentially of what's that going to be able to bring to that space? Additionally, is we're taking a look at this next gen of AI at the edge, right? And AI at the edge is basically going to start to drive a tremendous amount of new technology in the store that's really going to be, a central hub. And when we think about it, AI in general or the cloud in general, the latency today associated with that of traveling over the network and getting that information back is probably not fast enough for a QSR environment. So most of that decision-making, telemetry data, the gathering that has to happen needs to happen real time within the store. So what we're starting to see and do a lot more of is that AI edge at the stack, that stack in the store, which then starts to drive and affect everything that's out there. And when we start thinking about, digital menu boards, outdoor displays, for us, it's the kiosk as well, right? We haven't really talked about that. What is that? There's going to be new signage required in the store, more so than we're seeing today, because a lot of it's going to become self-serve. Why does a QSR want it to be self-serve? Right? Because I am going to choose the chocolate shake more often hitting the button than saying it out loud.
No, that's true.
Right? And we already saw that, right? We did a large, one of the first true kiosk plays for a fast casual QSR, and they saw a 150% increase in somebody selecting a cookie, right? Which was a huge margin boost at their business just by moving to that kiosk environment. So, when we start to think about the digital signage that's going to be in that QSR environment, it's really touching across everything. It's going to be better connectivity to the kitchen. It's going to be better connectivity with the POS. All of it's got to drive on a network, and then all of that's going to need the decision engines that are going to be driving in the store as well. So we got a lot of work to do on top of the installation, managed services, pre-configuration, restaurant in the box, and all that work. Because Brian's going to go design something crazy, and then we got to figure out how to and get that on site in a timely fashion for all the promises that he made.
I'll just keep you on your toes.
Yeah.
Leads me to my next point beautifully. Brian, how do you think, in your opinion, that QSRs can use content strategy to do more than just show the menu items and, hey, here's what's available and what you can buy?
Yeah, it's the one trend I've seen a couple of times that's appeared is the sort of theatrical storytelling of how the product is made. You started to see like Sweet Green had done that a bit, and I think Just Salad too also, and just they already have this open kitchen kind of concept, and it was to tell the story of where the product, how that particularly was made. So I think there's a little bit of the theatrical. People are very more cautious of where the products and where all the produce is coming from, and to interject some of that into it is also a nice way to help people feel comfortable with the decisions that they're making on product. So I see more of that coming into play. I like these little moment takeovers, these little LTOs or these flybys of product. Again, it draws the attention to it. But then I also like brands that are open to doing a little bit of humor into it as well, where you have, pop out, certain elements of the brand that pop out or paying homage to the brand or little changes there that just draw in or tell a story about who they are. Because I feel like it's not just, obviously there is the selling part of it, and it's getting people to be aware of the menu items. But then I also think there's this aspect of you want people to continue to return. You want them to have a pleasant visual experience, especially if there's a queue too. You want people to look at that and study that menu a lot more closely, so that maybe they do add on another item. Maybe there's something that they decide to order from themselves that they're unaware of. And I feel like you can only do that if you creatively draw attention to that, or just tell a story while you have an audience that's there. So I find more of that coming into play. And then, I mean, Robert kind of alluded it to you. I think, as different display technologies come into play, you just have a cleaner canvas that'll be present than what is there now, as we see the thick bezel displays or somewhat thin that are up there, which is fine. And you see some seamless that are there. But, I think as some of these other, DV LED comes into play, we can push the visuals a lot more and have something that's truly different and truly unique to it as well. Without, and of course that's the challenge too, is like you want to do that, but you don't want to detract from the purpose of the menu board. Like you used to see a lot of these made, these full takeovers of the menu board. And though cool, the reality is the whole menu disappeared for a period of time. So as much as it is a great idea to promote one product, you're also confusing the audience because it's disappearing. So I think it's just that balance of how much you push the creativity with where the display technology is at to where the CMS can handle. Give more on Roberts to keep his on his toes, so that when I give him a design, he's not going to really freak out when I give him, knowing that we're really trying to help the brand create a very unique visual experience for their guests.
Is there a example or brand or QSR that you guys can think of that you think is either really doing it right or really doing it wrong, that you think is just like a good example?
I'll say Sweetgreen. I think there's elements. I mean, Sweetgreen is not it's a fairly static board. There's not a lot of animation. I think it's one panel that is focused mostly on what's happening sort of behind or how things are being prepped. Bobby's Burger has been doing some. I've seen a couple of theirs that have popped up in casinos. So I think they've had to elevate. And I think they're actually, aren't they? They're opening down near neck of the woods too. I think there's some in Charlotte.
Are they? Okay, let me look that up.
I think that's where they're popping up at now. I think Charlotte and like Arizona and Denver are some key areas. But they've been. I like the design of that brand. It's just fun to where it was originally and to where it is now. Fast casual, I feel like can push the boundaries a lot more than some of the bigger ones, just because I think they're a little bit more closer to the brand. There's a little bit more opportunity to control it than I think the big guys have, unfortunately. So I like just a lot of these regional fast casuals that are popping up. They put a lot of emphasis on their brand and their store design too. So it's not just the menu board; it's the brand. It's the full consistency.
I don't necessarily. I think I can give you more examples of brands that are doing it wrong than the ones that are doing it right. I know there was a comment I saw earlier on the forum that I'm just about to order something and then it disappears, right? So I think you don't want to, and I think as Brian mentioned that as well. You don't want to take something away that something's about to do. But I do want to mention something about content strategy that I think is kind of interesting and maybe missing. We work with a lot of QSRs with drive-throughs, and a lot of them want to show all their menu items in the drive-through. A great example was one out on the West Coast. I think it was Jack in the Box. They're open 24 hours. They got a huge menu. They put 5 displays in their drive-through to kind of get across what they wanted. Well, how much time are they spending trying to read all that, especially if I'm not familiar with Jack in the Box? I think some of the better ways of using signage would be to limit the number of items you're trying to sell in the drive-through, maybe based on wait time, right? I think there was one major QSR that had a project where if it got really busy, they limited it just to their main items and try to get people through there as quickly as possible that got the kitchen going. So I think that's maybe not so much storytelling, but I think it is kind of driving towards efficiency and speed of service.
The drive-throughs, that's a good point too. And I know we haven't chatted about that a lot here. I mean, that's a big area where a lot of QSRs are investing in, and I think they're really pushing that. And, And I think to Robert, to your point, I think a lot of them are figuring out their strategy, what to do with it. I mean, it's just like anything in the curve. It's like, we'll just put menu boards up there and tie it into the ordering system and make it convenient. But now it's like, what more can they do with it, or how they make it more an efficient part of the operation? Because I mean, we've even seen too. I mean, there are new designs coming out to where it is just drive-through only, and so that changes the whole game, because people are not going in as much. So now they're sticking to the drive-through, and the drive-through experience has to be tailored so that it accommodates people in the car as well as people that are waiting. And then you also have the fact too that a lot of QSRs are now their associates are walking around with the tablets taking orders before people even get to see the menu board itself. Right. So that is happening 3 to 4 cars back before they even see any aspect of it. And that's either just a fan base that goes there and knows the order, but then you also think that's a lost opportunity because maybe there's a chance to upsell them on something that they're unfamiliar with, or randomly they're going to do something different on a Wednesday. So
yeah.
But you see that where's that tie-in with the CMS going to come into that user base that you're talking about? You've got computer vision, right, which AI is going to be able to leverage from a license plate read. And then how are you leveraging your loyalty app to be reached when you're in proximity as well, if you've unlocked that, right? So if you think of that content that get pushed to you while you're sitting in your car, especially like you think of, notorious here in the Seattle area, Chick-fil-A is, a huge fad. I don't know if, where everybody else is at, but, out into the road line for, one of the first Chick-fil-A's that opened up. A lot of places to get a chicken sandwich. Don't know why you would sit in that line that way, but yeah, right. They're churning through. Well, how do you get those orders to the kitchen fast enough to be able to understand who's there? And I think the loyalty app as well as the computer vision are going to do a lot of that, which really opens up that up. How's the CMS going to start to go push and be a part of that play as well?
I will say one other. Oh, sorry, Robert.
No, go ahead.
I will say one other, not to detract too much, but one other area I definitely find exciting or just interesting to watch too is that you have a lot of mom and pop stores that are popping up as well that are finding digital signage. I think that in part goes to the big QSRs that are investing into it. They see it and they want to be competitive. And so they're discovering this world too, which is exciting because you find, the ones or twos. I mean, I go into my local bagel shop and there's a digital menu board. And I'm like, oh, wow, that's actually kind of cool. It's terrible on design. I can't tell what they're pushing here. I just know I want my egg bagel. But I think it shows that, look, there is a lot of opportunities that are opening up out there, and it's a trickle down effect, and I think the trends that we're seeing here are the trends that start to come down into our local neighborhood. And there's also new groups that are getting involved with it too. I think a lot of these menu boards I see locally are done by nice little marketing agencies that are stepping their foot into the water, which is great. I mean, it's great for our industry, it's great for exposure. So I think that's also kind of interesting to see where some of those trends, how far do they come down into the mom and pop shops. I almost just want to do my bagel shop for free now, and I'm just thinking about this.
It's the work you got to do, Brian, right?
Yeah, right. It's all the hustle. It's the hustle.
I want to add one thing onto what Sean had said, because it reminded me of a major coffee chain up in Sean's neck of the woods, Starbucks. And over 12 years ago, they did something really interesting in their content. They took a part of their content in the drive-through and used it to show the image of the barista to the car. So you could have that face-to-face conversation. The story was the CEO at the time he didn't want to lose the connection of people coming into the store. But I thought that was a really interesting thing. It was, I think, even a little bit out of the box, like creating this face-to-face. And there was videos of people doing sign language in the drive-through. which I thought was kind of interesting. So, because you could do that face to face now. I think there needs to be something like that will kind of create a little bit of interest and excitement. And then going to your point about loyalty, I go to I go to McDonald's just because I want to get free stuff using their app. I'm like, I will. What can I get? Right?
Yep.
Buy it a little.
Me on Free Fry Friday when you get your free medium fry with your $2 purchase. Sorry for interrupting.
I love that.
I love it.
So as we're kind of winding down here, I'm interested how each of you feel about the technologies that are kind of on the up and up, like the AI, the automation, the real-time data. How are those changing how we think about, or how you are thinking about QSR signage design?
I mean, I'd say from our side, I mean, I'm glad it's finally there because it's something that we had talked about. It was challenging to implement because the CMS didn't have the capability for it. The players that were there, if you were able to, didn't have the processing capability to deliver. And so now that all of that is there now, it brings to life a lot of these strategies and concepts we were pushing, and either the QSR didn't see it because maybe the technology wasn't quite there to support it, and or those hooks weren't in place and we couldn't really demonstrate. We could only mock it up and not really show how that could actually perform in a real life scenario. So I think now I just absolutely love it because we've always said that there's that ability, and it's powerful to have data to help tell that story. So I love where it's trending. And AI, it's I think for the win in QSR.
Yeah, I think just from my perspective, AI is going to continue to open up a lot of the digital signage is the way that they're going to be able to communicate with you for what AI is going to be able to unlock, be it computer vision, understanding who you are, the connectivity into your loyalty app. So it's recognize you and speaking to you, and that content eventually is going to be served in a very personal way, no matter where you're at in or on the outside of the store. So those are things that I'm really excited about the future here, right? It creates a tremendous amount of opportunity for everybody that's probably listening. Our content creators and the creative folks are going to continue to be able to go drive and build innovative things with their great minds. And then from a technology standpoint, we're going to be able to continue to deliver a great ROI to our customer base, which I think is really important. They're going to see their receipts increase by a certain percentage, and they're going to have customers that feel more connected to the brand.
Yeah, I have arguments daily with AI about what is AI. I still am not entirely sure. I think there's going to be some good applications of it. I think AI, that whole concept is a little bit kind of misunderstood. But I think the voice ordering piece, I think, will potentially have some application as it improves. I've seen where that can work. And maybe even not so much it has to necessarily be voice ordering, but maybe it's on the side listening and then popping things up onto the menu that things could be good add-ons to what's being ordered, or to be able to help guide the overall order and maybe the overall ticket size. I think the camera analytics through CMS is pretty cool, but I haven't found anybody yet, at least from my point of view, that knows how to manage all that data, right? I can read that, maybe it's the identity through a license plate, which I guess potentially you could do, but if there's a male ordering versus a female, or there's kids in the car, how are you tracking all that data? Certainly you can look at it, as I mentioned before, about speed of service, right? If all of a sudden you're seeing a long line of cars in the drive-through and that's what your AI is looking at, or your analytics are looking at, maybe I change my content now to a simple menu to speed up that speed of service. But I think it'll be interesting. I mean, I'm still waiting for it probably won't be when I'm around, but to see when AI will take over the world.
As we all are, as we all are.
I think just on the AI point though, I mean it's funny, and maybe I think the other thing to clarify, I think for those that are kind of watching in, I think AI in this kind of situation, it's obviously it's such a buzzword and we throw it around as a trend, but I think in this particular situation, how we I don't know, and again I don't want to speak for Robert and Sean, although I'm sure you both agree, the AI piece in this situation is really just as a tool that helps to understand the data that's coming in real time and allowing the menu board to display information without having to have that kind of person watching it to display it. So it's making it's automating the process. It's an aggregate. It's automating the data, and it's you still have to go through and develop that strategy for the AI to tie in so that it hits those performance goals. So it's not as if this is an AI that's secretly manipulating people. It's the AI that is helping to automate a process that needs that help to automate it because it leads to efficiencies. And also, I don't see it on the visualization piece, meaning that I don't look at it as creating content. I still think you do need designers to lay out a board. You need photographers and to take pictures of food and to stage that. All that is not how I'm seeing AI. I see it more as just a useful tool to curate and to display that information relative to what's happening at the POS or any other third party data that's pulling into it. I think it's not trying to make this a scary process. It's really trying to help make a process more efficient.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's probably reducing IT costs and driving a tremendous amount of efficiency at the store level. That I kind of talked about those Jenga together systems that really everybody's operating for one reason or another due to their customizations that they had. It really starts to unravel that. And then from the efficiency standpoint, we're seeing AI not used like people think about, but I often talk about consumer AI, like you type something into ChatGPT, right?
Yeah.
That's not what we're talking about here, right? Yeah. The ability for computer vision to read 5 license plates back and understand, hey, this, white car ending with license plate 123, the guy always orders a venti drip with vanilla sweet cream and a sausage breakfast sandwich. Sometimes between 6 and 7 o'clock, we could probably start prepping in advance some of these things that might be coming down the line from an order readiness standpoint. Because today the kitchen is still the chokehold, right?
Yeah, but that has to be purposely allowed by that customer to give that data to them, right? I think we got to be careful and state that. I think the industry has been very, very careful about not going out and taking that data without getting express permission to use it.
And I think you'll see it'll tie back to that loyalty app and what you do and do not allow via that loyalty app in order to get a better customer experience with that brand that you want to be aligned to.
Right.
So in my New Jersey situation, it would recognize to not have me order that again.
Yeah.
And results.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you want to share the New Jersey situation?
Where that you've been overserved before you order, and you should.
I think that's probably the best way forward. You've been overserved in food that probably did not digest all the way and was regurgitated onto the menu.
Yeah.
Is that a more politically correct way to say that?
Yeah, I think it is. I think that's very PC.
Yeah. Thank you.
On that note.
That's how we end this.
Bye. I wanted to go around and just offer you each the time and the space to give any final thoughts, as well as tell people watching where they can find you or your companies on the internet. Robert, would you like to start?
Yeah. So first of all, I wanted to kind of go with that start-stop thing. I think brands and QSR need to, especially the smaller ones, need to stop going to Best Buy for their digital signage displays. I think they need to focus on getting something that's going to look nice and last, whether it's from me or from another commercial provider. And then I think don't just use a digital sign to replace your static sign. Think about what you can do with it. And the first thing to really start doing, and I think this is number one, ask, why do you want digital signage? We ask this to so many different brands, and sometimes they don't know how to articulate what it is they want to add digital signage for, right? And I think that's the most important thing to create the whole strategy. So anyways, you can find out more about us at gdsdisplays.com or look me up on LinkedIn.
Perfect. Brian, you're next. New Jersey situation.
I love it. I would say don't undervalue design. I think that's another crucial part in everything that we're talking about here. That also has a value to the way people, order and what their experience is. So don't undervalue that. Don't cut corners around design, and allow design to be part of the process, because that will take advantage of the technologies that Robert and GDS has to the way that Sean is thinking through the system and how to implement that. So have all three of us in the room at the same time. You can find me at openeyeglobal.com, also on LinkedIn, and then we're also on X as well at OpenEye Global.
And was that Skype?
No, it was Teams.
I'm like, there was like something. That was,
it's the Skype call. Yes, it's
I
me.
can't be the only one who thought that, right?
You tell somebody 5 minutes, and I'll be ready to talk. And
that was the ghost of Christmas past coming back for us.
All right, apologize for that. I want to take it back. Like the Best Buy display thing just kind of like makes me shake my head. Right, small, large, medium. Really think about the display and the technology that you're buying, because it does ultimately matter. And whatever you think you're saving, you're going to pay 4, 3, 5, 7, 8, 10 times more in the future if you didn't design that. I would say when you think about your content management systems, you also got to think about your content. Leverage professionals that understand what they're doing. Just take that time. Again, you're going to see the ROI that goes along with that. It is your brand. It's how you're connecting with your customers, and your brand is the most important thing that you have to take care of. So make sure that you're utilizing people that are experts in putting that together, and that's part of the design that Brian was talking about. And then make sure that you are thinking forward with what you are doing from an IT perspective, and how you're bringing that all together with strong networks. You can find me on LinkedIn as well. Also, my company at zones.com, a global provider. We would be happy to put together your restaurant in a box and help you implement all of these great technologies that we've been talking about today.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much. I have had a blast talking to you. A really great 3 people to have in the room to have this conversation. So thank you guys so much for lending me your afternoon.